Hey man, what's up?
Hey, what's
Um,
up?
yeah, I just wanted to see how you were and how you're doing after your recovery, and just wanted to say or ask if you had the time to tell me your story.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my story. What a journey it's been. I wasn't there. I wasn't about to expect what was about to happen to me, which was gonna allow me to kind of look on the inside. And so on October the 13th, 2019, I was in Budapest and I just started a European Union program. And it was a Sunday. And the last things that I really remember of that day was waking up and going to a bit of a networking event, which was like in the form of a football match. And I remember turning up and meeting my team, meeting the people, being like, "Hey, how's it going?" And what happened was I turned around to go to the toilet, and I just dropped to the floor. And I spent 7 days in a coma. And I had no prior health conditions. I had no prior hereditary issues in my family line. And what happened to me was, as I turned and I dropped to the floor, I started having a fit. And the medics ran over to me and they were really confused as to what was happening. For obvious reasons. And they started thinking I was having an asthma attack. Um, and so they tried to calm me down, but at this point, I'd fully passed out. And they then called the ambulance. Ambulance came, put me in the back of the ambulance, and then I went towards the hospital. On the way to the hospital, the medics were looking at me and they were saying, "He's not having an asthma attack. His brain is shutting down." And they had to reroute the ambulance and take me to the neurological hospital in Budapest. And so I was on the way to hospital. They then realized that my brain was actually filling with blood, and I started to really like black out. And I went straight to the neurological hospital. At this point in time, there'd been phone calls to my family, trying to get hold of my family, being like, "This is what's happening to Leif, like he's in Budapest." My mum bought the next flight out. So she flew in, and that evening I was in the neurological hospital, and the doctors had to operate on me immediately. Operation was to drain the blood that had filled in my brain. And what happened to me is I had an aneurysm, which is where the blood bulges up in one of your arteries and then just bursts. So the aneurysm had actually ruptured. I had no prior feelings, no prior conditions, and it just went pop like a ticking time bomb. When this popped, this aneurysm, my brain obviously filled with blood. So when I was in the operating theatre, the first thing they had to do was drain all the blood from my brain. And then they said, "Okay, wow, we drained the blood, but his brain is still slowly slowing down and shutting down. We need to solve this issue." With an aneurysm, a grade 5 subarachnoid haemorrhage is what it's called. There's about 90% mortality rate. And so my mum obviously had to arrive to the hospital and she had to sign a letter that said, "Late's about to go into the operating theatre and there's a chance that he won't come out." And so in that moment, I was completely unconscious. And I then was back into the operating theatre. And what they did is they put two pieces of metal in my brain during two different operations. One inside of my artery to help the blood flow through my brain, and another thing called a coil, which was used to suppress the aneurysm. And so during this time, I was in a very unstable state. And by this point, a few more of my family members had flown out. This was the next day. And I'd spent the following 7 days in a coma where the doctors were worried to wake me up because my brain was still very fragile. They'd managed to stabilize the aneurysm and clean as much blood out as possible. But during this whole time, I was dead to the world, and it was unsure if I was ever going to wake up again. And so at this point, as you can imagine, my family was going through hell and back, trying to work out what happens if Leith dies, what happens if Leith doesn't ever wake up, and all these thoughts were running through my family's head. And so at that point, it was quite intense for them. But after the 7 days, the angels had been doing their work, because after 7 days I started to wake up again, and it was one of the most profound things that I think my family and this hospital had ever experienced. One thing, because the doctor had said that I was one of the youngest persons that he'd ever operated on. You tend to have aneurysms later in your life. But I always, laugh and say I've lived many lives in the time that by the time I was 23. So, and the doctors were really surprised that it even happened to me. And when I woke up, I was in a very comic state, and half of my body was completely numb. So what happened was, when my brain filled with blood, the receptors in my brain started firing, and they pretty much fired out of gas in a way that caused a stroke to also happen whilst I was in the coma. So I woke up with near to no movement at all on the right side of my body. And I still remember vividly these 3 doctors standing over me, telling me that we're unsure whether your movement will ever come back. And I remember crying so much in that moment, because I'd woken up, but there was a chance that I would live the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And for me, that was so scary, and it's even scary to reflect on. But there was a part of me that just knew that I was gonna move again. I just knew, deep down, that I was never gonna live a reality where I wasn't doing all the things that I really loved to do. And I remember my dad standing over me, and for the first time, my mum, my dad, me and my 2 sisters had been in the same room for 20 years. And so it's crazy how sometimes these big crises can bring people together. And at that point in time, there was no differences. It was all just we just need to be here for Leif. And I remember my dad standing over me, telling me, Leif, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to start to imagine yourself doing all the things that you love to do. I want you to visualize and feel what it means to be running again, cycling again, swimming again. And I would spend nights in this hospital with my eyes closed, really drugged up because of the pain in my head and my... Over the process of about 2 weeks following, I went from near to no movement in my body to moving my right arm fully, to being able to remove my right leg with a Zimmer frame, to then having a walking stick, to then after week 3, I was walking again with a limp. And that recovery journey was something that the doctors have never seen before. It can only take a few years to do that. And I have absolutely no idea the science behind this and the spirit science behind this. But just even to have that experience was amazing. And I just knew deep down that I would be fitter and stronger than I've ever been in my life. It's that no matter what we think we can accomplish, we can always do more. No matter how much we believe we can do, we can always push ourselves outside of the boundary and actually accomplish far more than we can even think in our mind. So lying in the hospital bed made me realize that, and then I was really putting that into practice last year. And I was training lots, I was looking after my health, and I am in a place where I far exceeded both my physical and biological health. And so you're like, if that was my life, would I be happy with the way that I spent my time? Because at the end of the day, we're all dying, and that's the truth of it. We're all on our way out, and at any given moment, we could just drop to the floor. So how do we live a life which we're grateful for everything that we do? We're happy about the things that we do with ourselves. And of course we have challenges because, we're human beings, and, we have shit days and up days and bad days, because that's life, right? We're emotional beings. But one thing I've realized is at the end of the day, if today is a good day, then that is the most important thing.